Most people think distance creates detachment. Logically, it should. Reduce communication, limit contact, focus on your own mission, move forward. That's how systems work. That's how physics works. Increase the space between two objects, and their influence should weaken. But human emotions don't follow the laws of engineering. I tried to keep my distance. I told myself it was the rational thing to do. I stayed busy. I built routines. I filled my mind with goals, plans, and endless distractions. Yet somehow every road led back to you. You became the thought that appeared between tasks, the voice that interrupted silence, the memory that survived every attempt to delete it. And that's when I realized something fascinating. The people who truly change us are not the ones we spend the most time with. They're the ones who occupy the space we cannot control. The more I tried to create distance, the more clearly I understood your impact. This isn't just a story about love. It's a story about why certain connections refuse to disappear, why the mind becomes trapped by a single person, and why sometimes the heart reaches a conclusion long before logic is ready to accept it. Because I tried to keep my distance, but somehow, you became my every thought. There is a strange assumption that most people carry throughout life. If you spend less time with someone, your feelings for them will naturally fade. It sounds logical. It sounds practical. Distance should reduce emotional intensity. Absence should create separation. Time should weaken attachment. Yet human psychology often behaves in exactly the opposite way. When someone becomes emotionally significant, their physical presence is no longer the only thing that influences us. In fact, once a person leaves the room, leaves the city, or leaves our daily routine, the mind often begins a process that can make them feel even more important than before. The absence of a person does not necessarily remove them from our emotional world. Sometimes it gives them more space to exist within it. The reason is simple. When someone is present, reality constantly updates our perception of them. We see their flaws, we hear their opinions, we experience ordinary moments. Reality keeps the image balanced, but when they are absent, reality loses its ability to correct imagination. The mind begins filling the empty spaces with memories, possibilities, and idealized versions of what once existed. Human beings are not only attached to people, they are attached to meaning. When someone affects us deeply, they become connected to emotions, experiences, dreams, and personal transformations. They stop being just an individual. They become a symbol of something larger, a symbol of hope, a symbol of comfort, a symbol of excitement, a symbol of who we were when we were around them. That is why absence can become so powerful. When a person is no longer available, the brain often starts searching for them in memories. A simple song becomes connected to them. A familiar street reminds us of them. A random conversation triggers thoughts about them. The emotional network associated with that person remains active even when they are physically gone. The mind dislikes unfinished stories. It wants closure. It wants certainty. It wants answers. When a connection becomes distant without complete emotional resolution, the brain continues working on it in the background. It replays conversations. It analyzes decisions. It imagines alternative outcomes. It creates scenarios that never happened, and conversations that never took place. This process can make someone feel more present in our thoughts than they ever were in reality. There is also a deeper psychological principle at work. Human beings naturally value things that appear scarce. What is constantly available often becomes familiar. What becomes unavailable suddenly gains emotional weight. It is not always because the person changed. It is because our perception changed. The moment access disappears, appreciation often increases. This does not mean every absence creates attachment. Emotional significance must already exist. The distance simply reveals it. It exposes feelings that may have been hidden beneath routine and familiarity. Sometimes people only realize the depth of their connection after separation occurs. While someone is part of everyday life, their presence can feel normal, predictable, expected. But once they are gone, the emotional impact of that absence becomes impossible to ignore. Their role in our lives becomes visible precisely because it is missing. Many people mistake this experience for weakness. They believe that thinking about someone repeatedly means they lack discipline or emotional control. In reality, the mind is responding to emotional importance. Significant experiences leave traces. Meaningful people leave impressions. Deep connections leave patterns that do not disappear, simply because distance has been introduced. The more meaningful the connection, the longer those patterns tend to remain. Another reason absence intensifies attachment is anticipation. When someone is unavailable, the imagination begins operating without limits. Instead of focusing on what is, the mind focuses on what could be. Future possibilities become emotionally attractive. Potential becomes more powerful than reality. A person who is absent can become associated with every future scenario we secretly desire. We imagine reunions. We imagine explanations. We imagine understanding. We imagine moments that satisfy emotional needs that remain unmet. The emotional brain does not always distinguish clearly between actual experiences and vividly imagined ones. Repeated imagination strengthens emotional associations. The more frequently someone occupies our thoughts, the more deeply they become embedded in our emotional landscape. This creates a cycle. Absence leads to thinking. Thinking strengthens attachment. Stronger attachment creates more thinking. The person becomes increasingly significant, not because new experiences are occurring, but because internal attention continues feeding the connection. Memories also undergo a transformation during absence. Negative details often fade faster than positive ones. Painful moments lose clarity while meaningful moments remain vivid. The brain naturally organizes experiences around emotional importance. As time passes, certain memories become highlighted while others are pushed into the background. This selective process can make a person appear larger than life within our minds. The smile becomes brighter, the conversations become deeper, the connection becomes more unique, the emotional impact becomes more profound. What once existed as a complex human relationship gradually transforms into something almost symbolic. The person becomes connected to longing, possibility, and emotional significance all at once. Distance creates silence, and silence often amplifies whatever emotions already exist beneath the surface. Without constant interaction, distractions disappear. Without daily conversations, the emotional core of the connection becomes easier to notice. The feelings that were once hidden behind ordinary moments become impossible to overlook. The paradox is that people often try to create distance in order to reduce emotional attachment, only to discover that the absence itself reveals how deeply attached they truly are. The space they hoped would create detachment instead creates awareness. The silence they expected would bring relief instead brings clarity. The distance they believed would weaken the connection exposes just how much emotional meaning had already taken root within them. There is a moment in every meaningful connection when two forces begin fighting for control inside us. One is logic, the other is emotion. Logic speaks with certainty. It presents evidence. It analyzes facts. It calculates risks and consequences. It reminds us of what makes sense, what is practical, and what should happen according to reason. Emotion speaks a completely different language. It does not care about timing. It does not care about convenience. It does not care about plans, strategies, or carefully constructed conclusions. It simply feels what it feels. And when these two forces collide, the result is often one of the most exhausting internal battles a person can experience. Most people assume that intelligence protects them from emotional confusion. They believe that if they think hard enough, analyze deeply enough, or remain disciplined enough, they can control their feelings entirely. They treat emotions like problems waiting to be solved. But emotions are not machines. They do not obey commands. You cannot simply decide to stop missing someone because logic says you should. You cannot erase attachment through a list of rational arguments. You cannot force the heart to follow a schedule created by the mind. That is where the conflict begins. Logic may tell you that someone is no longer part of your life. Emotion still waits for them. Logic may remind you of every reason a connection should be forgotten. Emotion continues searching for traces of that person in memories. Logic may insist that moving forward is the correct decision. Emotion keeps looking backward. This contradiction creates a strange experience. You know what you should do, yet you struggle to do it. You understand reality, yet part of you remains connected to a different version of reality that exists only inside your emotional world. Many people become frustrated with themselves during this stage. They ask questions that seem impossible to answer. Why am I still thinking about them? Why do I still care? Why can't I simply let go? Why does my heart refuse to accept what my mind already understands? The answer lies in the fact that logic and emotion are designed for different purposes. Logic is focused on survival, efficiency, and decision-making. Emotion is focused on meaning, connection, and significance. Logic evaluates information. Emotion evaluates importance. When someone becomes emotionally important, the connection becomes stored in parts of the mind that operate far beyond conscious reasoning. The feelings attached to that person are linked to experiences, memories, hopes, desires, and moments of vulnerability. Those emotional pathways cannot simply be switched off because logic has reached a conclusion. In many cases, the more aggressively a person tries to suppress their feelings, the stronger those feelings become. The mind has a fascinating tendency to focus on whatever it is told to avoid. Try not to think about someone. Immediately, thoughts of them appear. Try not to remember certain moments. The memories become clearer. Try to force yourself to stop caring. You become even more aware of how much you care. This creates frustration because logic interprets emotional persistence as failure. But emotions do not disappear through resistance. They often become stronger when denied. Imagine carrying a heavy object underwater. The harder you push it down, the more forcefully it tries to rise back to the surface. Emotions behave in much the same way. The feelings we refuse to acknowledge often become the feelings that control us most. That is why some people spend months trying to convince themselves they have moved on while secretly thinking about the same person every day. Logic creates a narrative of progress, while emotion quietly continues its own process beneath the surface. The battle becomes even more intense when uncertainty is involved. The human mind can tolerate pain more easily than ambiguity. A painful truth is still a truth. Uncertainty leaves endless possibilities open. Logic wants closure. Emotion wants hope. Logic seeks conclusions. Emotion searches for possibilities. Logic wants a final answer. Emotion keeps asking, what if? What if things had been different? What if another chance existed? What if they still think about me? What if the story is not over? These questions create emotional momentum that logic struggles to stop. Even when evidence suggests one outcome, emotion remains attracted to possibility. Because emotions are not powered by certainty, they are powered by significance. The more meaningful a connection feels, the harder it becomes for logic to completely override it. There is also an identity component to this struggle. Sometimes the person is not the only thing we are attached to. We become attached to who we were around them, the version of ourselves that existed in that connection, the dreams we imagined, the future we envisioned, the feelings we experienced. Logic may recognize that the relationship changed. Emotion continues grieving everything associated with it. The loss becomes larger than the person alone. It becomes the loss of possibility, the loss of expectation, the loss of a future that once felt real. This is why emotional recovery is rarely a straight line. Some days logic feels dominant. You feel clear, focused, and certain. Then a memory appears. A familiar song plays. A place reminds you of them. A random thought enters your mind. Suddenly emotion returns with surprising intensity. Not because you are moving backward, not because you have failed, but because emotional processing does not follow the same timeline as rational understanding. The heart often arrives at acceptance much later than the mind. The deepest internal struggles are rarely between right and wrong. They are often between what we understand intellectually and what we feel emotionally. One part of us seeks certainty, the other seeks connection. One part wants to move forward, the other is still trying to make sense of what mattered. One part focuses on reality, as it exists today. The other remains tied to emotions that were created long before logic had the chance to explain them. And within that silent conflict, countless people discover a truth that no amount of intelligence can completely eliminate. Some feelings cannot be reasoned away the moment we want them to disappear, because the strongest emotions are not formed through logic, and they rarely leave according to logic's schedule. It rarely happens all at once. No one wakes up one morning and suddenly realizes that a single person has become the center of their inner world. The process is usually slow, subtle, and almost invisible in the beginning. It starts with a conversation that lingers longer than expected, a smile that stays in your memory after the moment has passed, a feeling that seems small enough to ignore. At first they are simply someone you think about from time to time. Then, without noticing it, you begin creating space for them inside your mind. A random event happens during the day, and your first instinct is to wonder what they would think about it. You hear a song and immediately associate it with them. You experience something exciting and wish they were there to see it. Their presence starts extending beyond physical interaction and begins entering your private thoughts. This is where emotional significance starts to grow. The human mind is naturally drawn toward whatever carries emotional weight. We remember what affects us. We revisit what moves us. We return to experiences that create strong feelings. When someone consistently triggers excitement, comfort, curiosity, admiration, or longing, the brain begins giving that person special attention. Attention is powerful. Whatever receives attention grows stronger in our mental world. Every thought creates another connection. Every memory strengthens another pathway. Every moment spent imagining, remembering, or wondering deepens the person's presence within the mind. What makes this process fascinating is that it often continues even when the person is absent. In many cases, physical distance does not reduce mental presence. Sometimes it increases it. When someone is no longer part of our daily routine, the mind compensates by keeping them alive internally. Conversations are replayed, memories are revisited, small details become significant. Things that once seemed ordinary suddenly feel important. A sentence they spoke months ago gains new meaning. A brief moment becomes unforgettable. A look, a laugh, a gesture, a memory begins occupying far more space than it ever did in real time. The reason is simple. Reality provides limits. Imagination does not. When people are physically present, we experience them as they are. We see their strengths and flaws. We interact with the complete reality of who they are. When they become absent, however, imagination begins participating in the relationship. The mind fills gaps. It creates possibilities. It replays favorite memories. It focuses on meaningful moments. And gradually the person becomes larger within our thoughts than they ever were within our daily lives. Another reason someone begins occupying every thought is anticipation. The brain is highly sensitive to uncertainty. Things we fully understand require less mental energy. Things we cannot fully understand demand more attention. If a connection feels unfinished, unresolved, or uncertain, the mind continues working on it in the background. It searches for answers. It seeks explanations. It tries to predict outcomes. It revisits the same emotional territory again and again. This is why someone can occupy your thoughts even when you are trying to focus on completely different things. The conscious mind may be working on daily responsibilities, but another part of the brain continues processing emotional questions that remain unanswered. What did they really mean? Do they ever think about me? Could things have been different? What would happen if we spoke again? These questions create a loop. The absence of certainty encourages continued thinking. Continued thinking strengthens emotional attachment. Stronger attachment creates even more thinking. The cycle feeds itself. Over time, the person becomes connected to numerous parts of your life. They are no longer just a memory. They become associated with songs, places, routines, dreams, hopes, and future possibilities. A restaurant reminds you of them. A city reminds you of them. A phrase reminds you of them. A season reminds you of them. The emotional network surrounding that person continues expanding. As more associations form, it becomes increasingly difficult to go through daily life without encountering something connected to them. This is why people are often surprised by how frequently someone enters their thoughts. It is not because they consciously choose it. It is because the brain has created countless pathways leading back to that individual. Even ordinary experiences become triggers. A familiar scent, a specific time of day, a movie scene, a passing comment from a stranger. Suddenly the mind returns to them again. There is also a deeper reason why one person can become mentally dominant. Human beings are not only attracted to people, they are attracted to meaning. Sometimes a person represents more than themselves. They become connected to our desires, aspirations, healing, growth, or sense of possibility. We stop thinking only about who they are. We begin thinking about what they symbolize. They represent comfort during difficult times. They represent hope during uncertain moments. They represent a version of life we desperately wanted to experience. Because of this, the emotional significance attached to them becomes amplified. The person becomes intertwined with our personal story. Thinking about them no longer feels separate from thinking about ourselves. Their image becomes connected to our future. Their memory becomes connected to our identity. And once that happens, removing them from our thoughts becomes extraordinarily difficult. The mind naturally returns to whatever feels important, not because it enjoys suffering, not because it wants to remain stuck, but because significance demands attention. The things that matter most occupy the largest spaces in our inner world. That is why a single person can gradually move from being an occasional thought to becoming a constant presence, not through force, not through intention, but through the quiet accumulation of memories, emotions, meanings, hopes, and unanswered questions. One thought becomes 10. 10 thoughts become a habit. The habit becomes a pattern. The pattern becomes part of daily life, until one day you realize something that would have seemed impossible in the beginning. Somewhere between the memories, the longing, the imagination, and the emotional significance they carried, that person stopped being someone you thought about occasionally and became someone who appeared in almost every corner of your mind. There comes a point in every deep emotional journey when resistance becomes more exhausting than acceptance. For a long time, you convince yourself that distance will solve everything. You believe that if you stay busy enough, think rationally enough, or focus on enough distractions, the feelings will eventually disappear. You create plans to move on. You build walls around your emotions. You tell yourself that what you feel is temporary, that time alone will erase the connection. At first, this strategy seems reasonable. After all, most problems in life can be solved through action. If something is broken, you fix it. If something is difficult, you work harder. If something stands in your way, you overcome it. But emotions do not always respond to effort. Some feelings become stronger the more aggressively you try to eliminate them. The harder you push them away, the more aware you become of their existence. This is often where the struggle begins. Not because the connection itself is painful, but because part of you refuses to acknowledge how much it matters. You become trapped between what you want to feel and what you actually feel. You tell yourself you should be over it, yet thoughts of them continue appearing. You tell yourself they are no longer important, yet their memory continues affecting your emotions. You tell yourself the story is finished, yet some part of your heart continues reading the same chapter. The conflict is not really with the other person. The conflict is with yourself. It is the battle between acceptance and resistance. Many people spend months, or even years, trying to escape feelings that are asking only to be understood. They mistake acceptance for surrender. They believe that acknowledging a connection means losing control. In reality, acceptance is not weakness. Acceptance is clarity. It is the moment you stop arguing with reality. It is the moment you stop pretending that something meaningful was insignificant. It is the moment you stop fighting emotions simply because they make you uncomfortable. Accepting a connection does not mean chasing someone. It does not mean abandoning self-respect. It does not mean putting your life on hold. It simply means telling yourself the truth. The truth that this person mattered. The truth that the connection affected you. The truth that certain experiences changed something within you. Once you stop denying these truths, something remarkable begins to happen. The emotional pressure starts decreasing. Not because the feelings immediately disappear, but because you are no longer wasting energy fighting them. Imagine carrying a heavy weight while insisting it is not there. The burden becomes twice as exhausting because you are carrying it and denying it at the same time. Acceptance removes the second burden. You stop pretending. You stop resisting. You stop demanding that your emotions follow a timeline that they never agreed to follow. This creates space for healing. Ironically, people often move forward only after they stop forcing themselves to move forward. The moment they stop running from the connection loses some of its power over them. Because what controls us most is often what we refuse to face. There is another important truth hidden within acceptance. Sometimes we are not trying to escape the person. We are trying to escape what they awakened inside us. They may have revealed loneliness we did not want to acknowledge. They may have exposed desires we tried to suppress. They may have awakened hope, vulnerability, passion, or longing. Those experiences can feel overwhelming. Blaming the connection becomes easier than confronting the emotions it uncovered. Yet genuine growth begins when we recognize that every meaningful relationship leaves a mark. Not every connection is meant to last forever. Not every story ends the way we imagined. Not every feeling leads to the future we hoped for. But that does not make the experience meaningless. Some people enter our lives to transform us rather than stay with us. Some connections teach us things we could not have learned alone. Some relationships reveal parts of ourselves that remained hidden for years. Accepting this allows you to view the connection differently. Instead of asking why you cannot forget them, you begin asking what the experience taught you. Instead of focusing only on what was lost, you begin recognizing what was gained. Instead of seeing the connection as a problem to solve, you begin seeing it as a chapter that shaped you. This shift changes everything. The person no longer exists only as an object of longing. They become part of your story, part of your growth, part of your understanding of yourself. The memories remain, but they become less painful. The thoughts remain, but they become less overwhelming. But so does your ability to keep moving forward. And maybe that is the greatest realization of all. The goal was never to forget them. The goal was to understand why they mattered, accept what they changed within you, and continue becoming the person you were meant to be. Because sometimes the strongest form of love is not possession. It is appreciation, not attachment, but understanding. And when you finally stop fighting the connection, stop resisting the memories, and stop demanding that your heart heal on someone else's timeline, you discover a quiet kind of freedom. The freedom that comes from accepting the past, embracing the lessons, and trusting that every meaningful connection, whether it stayed or left, helped shape the person you are today. Thank you.